Hi, I'm speaking with Rob Keener. He is executive chef at Flight here in downtown Hendersonville. He's a native of Hickory. He's lived in Hendersonville for about the past 9 years with his wife Mandy and his children. And Rob was formerly a commodities trader, but he has an experience in fine cuisine that goes back even earlier than his financial background. So tell me about how those two careers have played out for you.
Well, I first started cooking or working in kitchens when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old around the furniture market in Hickory, and just kind of liked the I guess nocturnal sort of lifestyle of the business, and continued through high school to work in several restaurants around Hickory, and then we went to North Carolina State, and I thought I was going to be an engineer until I found out what an engineer does. And the geology class was more interesting, so I switched my major. Actually, after the first day of geology class, I said, that's, I want to do that. So just because it kind of combined the outdoors with science, that it was pretty interesting. And after graduating, I moved out to Colorado, and worked all through NC State. At the time I was in school there, I worked in kitchens, and then moved out to Colorado and worked in a couple of restaurants in Vail, and ended up moving back to North Carolina, did some computer consulting work and things like that, and then moved here to Hendersonville to work as a trader for a guy that ran a hedge fund. And as they say, the rest is sort of history. And I worked, in that business, you get a Series 3, and then I worked for him kind of the way the requirement is you work for somebody else for 2 years and you go out on your own, and that's what I did, and started a fund on my own, and actually moved into the Federal Building right across the street, so I could see the back door of the restaurant, which was kind of interesting, and I literally was just kind of drawn back to it, and started working here a couple nights a week, and then they said, can you work more? And then, in a year and a half, I run the restaurant. So,
wow.
Yeah, so
it's
it's a pretty interesting story. I mean, there's probably more details, but that's kind of the nutshell.
Yeah, so you're a whitewater kayaker. How long have you been doing that?
I have been really just picked it up when I moved to Hendersonville, so I guess about 9 years now.
And go ahead.
8 or 9 years.
Okay. And so your company was Keener Investment Capital?
Keener Capital Management.
Keener Capital Management. And so you were working across the street at the Federal Building, and Flight was opened. When did Flight open?
I think the restaurant originally in its first incarnation about 5 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I remember my mom came here when it first opened. And so what drew you back? I mean, when you first came in, were you executive chef then, or?
No, I came in and just started out working as a line cook. I just honestly was tired of sitting at a desk, and wanted something that was more active and something that was more creative and more of a craft than the trading business. And it's a pretty cutthroat business, and so I just came back, started working a couple nights a week, and then was promoted pretty quickly to the sous chef position. And then after probably 6 months, I assumed the executive chef position.
Are you a self-taught chef?
Yeah, I grew up beside two grandmothers that had big gardens and everything. I had no idea that was the beginning of the training. But
your grandma?
Yeah, both of my grandmothers. We would go out and pick the vegetables out of the garden in the morning, and shell peas and wash onions and then eat it.
So you started out sort of classic Southern home cooking cuisine.
Yeah, and then we worked around the furniture market, and that was a lot of big volume caterings.
Mm-hmm.
We would do caterings for, because that's when the furniture market was in Hickory before it moved to High Point. and do caterings for 2,000 or 3,000 people on a Friday or Saturday night, and then get up the next day and do it again. And then I went to work in a French restaurant, a chef that was trained at Johnson and Wales in Rhode Island, and so that's where I really started to learn, the more classical French techniques. And then after my freshman year at State, I went traveling in Europe for about 3 months.
That was what I was going to ask you
And
about.
that was the biggest, probably, the most memorable meals were in France and Austria and different places where the cultures are just kind of intermingled along the borders of Italy and France and different places like that. And then I went as far as Budapest and a lot of different, just real eye-opening.
And was that specifically a culinary tour that you went over there to?
No, I just went over there with some money and a Eurail pass and just went, I think probably to, I can't remember exactly, but it was about 18 different countries, and we just went all over the place and, bungee jumping in France and, did some kayaking there, but nothing that was, is like what we have around here.
Right.
Which is, it was pretty foreign.
Right. So that's how
No
you
pun
moved.
intended.
So that's how you moved from down home Southern style cooking to south of France, or
Yeah,
whatever.
that was, really, that was the first time I was ever exposed to, it's, you go in and it's 3 or 4 courses, and then, at the end of the meal they bring out a big, a really big board of cheese and, all these different things. I'd never, sat down at a meal where there was a cheese course or anything like that. So it was definitely an interesting, experience. And I'd met some guys at college that one of them was a foreign exchange student. We went and stayed at his house in Austria, and then another friend from high school was a foreign exchange student, and we stayed at his house in Belgium. So we really, had this kind of an immersion that, you probably wouldn't ever get.
Was this when you were still a bachelor?
Yeah, I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. So, let me ask you. You and I started paddling together when you were still day trading and whatnot, and you mentioned that you wanted to get into a job that was more active and less sitting at a desk. But it sounds like this has been, if anything, as or more all-consuming than what you were doing before, because you were telling me you haven't been able to paddle a whole lot.
Yeah, well,
and you've got a family too,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah, so what I basically, we used to have a sort of general manager role and different things like that. Now I run the restaurant solely by myself.
Yeah.
And and that's just kind of people have quit, and we've decided, the owner and I have discussed, the kind of the options that we have, and in this sort of economic environment, the smartest option seems like, just kind of go with what we're doing. Seems to be working.
Now, when you say by yourself, do you have other people that work for you in the kitchen?
We have guys that work in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I don't cook everything by myself.
I was going to say that would be
but
quite a job.
as far as the traditionally you would have a front of the house manager that manages the servers and different things like that, and then you would have a person, the chef runs the kitchen. And in this scenario, it's just me. So
wow. And how long has it been like that?
About a year.
Yeah.
And so it works out pretty good. There's not a lot of I think what I've seen historically is people will say there's a lot of blame and there's discontent between the front of the house and the back of the house. So we've sort of by no design eliminated that by it just being one person.
Yeah.
And there's no,
you can't fight with yourself.
Yeah, you can't fight with yourself, and you can't, pass the buck and say, oh, so-and-so didn't do, these spreadsheets, or didn't do, the analysis of beverage sales or whatever, because it's just me.
So you have to do the financial side and the cooking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's, and it's kind of like the commodity business was sort of training for something. I had no idea, but it's, I have that ability, and, it's interesting. And,
just out of curiosity, how many hours do you think you put in a week here?
I probably work 60 or 70 hours a week. I was working more when we initially made the transition, but I quickly figured out that I couldn't do that. So now what I do is I usually will bring my kids over here in the morning for 30 or 45 minutes and make sure everything's, going the way it should be going, and then take off and come back at 2 o'clock or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What's your favorite dish that you create here?
I think, the seafood seems to be, to me, one of the most delicate and, easily manipulated mediums to work with. And I think one of our signature dishes is the sea bass dish that's pickled ginger and a sweet Thai chili sauce.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very good.
And then we have, just to kind of stay true to the, the region that we're in, we have those dishes that are classic southern dishes, like a pan-fried trout with bourbon pecan butter, and also have shrimp and grits and giant steaks and all those different things. And that's been the interesting thing. At first, I wanted to do all these things with the menu to show what I could do. And then after experimenting with different things, you realize, well, not everybody wants to see how creative you are, or all these or not everybody subscribes to your ideas about what's good and what's not good. So then you say, okay, well, let's meet the market 3/4 of the way. Let's still have some creativity, but also provide people something that is that what they want,
right?
Buy.
Some of both.
And then that was my biggest concern, with 10, 12 new restaurants opening up in the past year, is that we wouldn't stay busy. And but I think we've kind of proven my ideas wrong, or my concerns wrong, because we're busier than we were ever. So it's really good.
So Flight has created a niche for itself here.
Yeah.
It's great. Well, I better make sure this thing's recording. Let's see. So you were saying that you really like the building.
Yeah, I really like the design of the building. I think it's a good, venue for what style of food that I do. And it was built in the 30s by, I believe, Earl Stillwell. We also did the courthouse and some other historic buildings around Hendersonville, as well as some houses.
And it was a bank?
It was a bank, and it was last operational as a First Union that closed in '98.
Right.
I guess when Wachovia bought First Union.
Yeah, because your banquet room is a wine cellar and was the opening of the vault.
That was the safe deposit vault where the private dining room is.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the teller vault's where we store, and we have a humidistat in there. It's temperature and humidity controlled for the wine.
So once again, a mixture of finance and cuisine.
Yeah.